Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's Finance and Performance Committee meeting. I'll open us with our karakia. Lord, we meet to serve our community, to use our resources wisely and well, to represent all members of our community fairly, to make decisions that promote the common good. We recognise our responsibility to the past and the future, and the rights and needs of both individuals and community. As trusted servants, we seek blessings on our deliberations and on our efforts here today. May we act wisely and well. May all those that are ill, suffered loss, despair or lonely feel your loving hand, and that our communities join together to care for those most in need. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Right, thank you, councillors. There are no apologies, everyone's here, and nobody for public forum. Is there any notification of items that are not on the agenda? There appear to be none. Right, declarations of conflicts of interest in regards to today's meeting. Councillor Petty-Weber?
Yes, one of the papers does mention DMCI.
Okay, thank you.
I have a conflict, thank you.
We'll note that. Right, confirmation of the minutes. Can I have somebody move that the minutes are true and correct record from the 20th of November? Moved Councillor Chase, seconded Councillor Franklin. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. I'll just go through those. Page 3, page 4, page 5, and page 6. Thank you, councillors. Right, moving into reports. I'm going to hand over to Peter Wamsett, the Chief Advisor, to talk about local water done well. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Your Worship. In front of you is a proposed consultation document to go to the community, perhaps starting the 14th. We've got some date suggestions in there. The purpose of this, of course, is the process that we've been going through for almost 9 months, if not, if you take it back to the previous government. We're now into year 2.5, I think, of the process. We've got to the point where we've been working very closely with the Wairarapa councils. I've been responsible for dealing with the financial analysis with a consultant to prove the business case, work out where the efficiency of the borrowing in particular will come from. And we've landed at the point with this document, having only 2 hours ago, South Wairarapa have adopted their consultation document. In terms of the process that we've gone through to get to this point, we've had 3 levels of involvement: the officer level of the 4 councils, and the chief executives who have been regularly meeting as a steering group, and then the governance level, which has had our worship the Mayor as the chair of that committee, called the Advisory Oversight Group, which is Kerry Sutherland is also party of that. So we've got a mayor and an elected member from each of the 4 councils, plus both an iwi representative from both Kanunu and Rangatani present at those. And so this process we've been going through is to make sure that we understand each other, what our purposes and needs are, and assess if this is a good idea, working together. We are required under law to put up in front of the community the status quo, standalone, existing approach is the actual words used in the bill, or the law right now. So the existing approach is that we've essentially got in-house operation where we outsource and procure delivery through Downer, Terra Alliance contract, with our own staff overseeing and making sure that the work is done. So that's our existing approach, and we have to contrast that against another option. Now, that has turned out to be a lower cost option than standing alone. And partly that's because the law is changing again in terms of the regulatory functions that will be imposed on councils and the water organisations of the future. That is the Commerce Commission, who is going to ensure that the financial sustainability of delivery of water is assured, as well as looking at the standards of how the water is to be delivered. There are two levels of that. It's the treatment systems, those standards, which has always been Te Mata Arawai. That Te Mata Arawai has been renamed as the Water Services Authority, Te Mata Arawai, but also National Engineering Design Standards, which are currently going to be imposed based on the bill that's currently before Parliament. So that hasn't been determined, the new standards haven't been quite finalised, the quality standards haven't been quite finalised. So there are lots of moving parts still, but what we were looking at was, does it make sense to join forces, and not only in terms of the everyday operational efficiency and having one larger entity dealing with all matters, focused solely on water delivery, water services delivery, but also how can the finances be better managed. And that's access to funding that will perhaps free up councils from the anchor that's currently around our necks as a council, because we're right on those debt limits, and also what extra access to funding will the new entity, if it's formed, have available to it. And a lot of that leverage comes from the joining of forces, having a joint balance sheet of assets and different timing of capital projects across all four councils. So that's kind of where the real advantage of joining forces comes from, because you don't have all the projects hitting at the same time across that group. And it means that the funding can be more evenly spread. That means that you're not going to hit caps in Masterton for some time. So by averaging together, we continue to have access to funding at the nice low interest rates. And I think that's one of the other aspects of what is the interest rate that the future council might have to incur should we have to go and get an extended credit rating through Standard & Poor's, for instance. So that's the helicopter view that I have on all of this. We have had direct input from DIA, the reports that they gave each council last year, including working together with the Wairarapa. They did the same for the Manawatu Wanganui for us. So we were able to contrast before Christmas what that looked like. We're now moved on from there, and we're now with the willing parties of the Wairarapa, trying to work together to see how we can make this work functionally. The oversight from government came from, there's a Crown Infrastructure Partners has just changed their name. They are the main government funding agency for all of New Zealand. Their head of finance is the person that wanted to watch over our project in particular. So they provide that additional credibility that we are on the right track. Their new name is National Infrastructure Fund and Financing. NIFF. NIFF, National Infrastructure Funding and Financing. So, nifty. I'm sure that's part of the branding. But just as important as the funding agency who are going to supply either money to the council in the future as loans, or to a water organisation should it form. So we've got LGFA there watching over the numbers. They have been working closely with DIA on the numbers. They know our numbers. They have signed off on this too at a high level. And I say that because the price we know of all this infrastructure is going to cost all those connected who are being charged more in time. It's just how can we keep that as low as we can, that increase. And access to funding is going to be the key. It's going to give us flexibility as well, and flexibility to whoever might take over this if that's what the decision is. And so that means that funding agency needs to be able to, issue bonds and achieve their own lending criteria to international lenders with government backing. So that's kind of how it works. This is LGFA. From there, there's a backstop of $1.2 billion that the government has for local government that we get some assurance from. That ensures that local authorities achieve the lowest cost interest rating of a AAA currently, depending on which Standard & Poor's or Moody's, AA. So this is how we get such low interest rates. But those are based on a set of criteria, financial criteria, that are super complex. They involve having to recalculate how much income we've got against our debt, and working our way through that and making sure that within 10 years our models do show that they're sustainable. And we've got essentially 5 years to work towards to get it close to where we need to be, and another 5 years to actually achieve that. So that's the broad criteria that we're working towards. To give you a sense, the objective, we're about 6% of our revenue to debt. That has to rise to about 10% within 10 years. So that's the objective target point. That means prices have to increase to do that. But the reason that we have to do that is that our debt is rising, so we have to fund that debt. We no longer will have to fund debt for depreciation and save money. All renewals will be funded from loans, but those loans will be repaid at a rate of 6% and eventually 10% per annum. So that's like having debt for 10 years. So that's pretty quick repayment of loans, but you see we never used to borrow for renewals. So it's not actually that accelerated when you think of it that way. We would put aside money for depreciation. That's not how the model will now work for waters. For council, well, for all our other infrastructure, it still has to be the old way, but for waters it will be under this new regime. And I would only say one thing else, that if you think back to 1900 when some of our wastewater pipes were first installed, the councils of the day would have had to go and borrow some money. They would have put the pipes into green fields. You know, it was easy paddock, side of road stuff. Get out the shovel, dig a hole, put the pipe in. There it sat. The loan got repaid maybe over a 20-year period, say, but the loan was gone. Then all of the ratepayers thereafter benefited from that without actually having to fund or prepare for replacing those assets. And we've kind of got a whole multi-generations in between the time that the loans were originally paid off and to when we started funding depreciation in 1999 for our council, of no funding. So we're essentially at that same place now where we have to borrow for renewals. So I hope that makes sense. Anyway, Karsten has been extremely providing good leadership across all 4 councils, preparing these types of documentation for consultation. So all the councils have been able to see what the work Karsten has done. Thank you, Karsten. The AOG, which is the advisory oversight group for the mayors, only yesterday, signed off the final wording of what they preferred to go out to the community. So we've got a slight timing difference there. We were aware of those words for the most part leading into this. So only a couple of tweaks really that need to happen, just to nothing substantial in terms of intent, purpose. There's no change to our recommendations. The Mayor's message is still the same, unless Mayor Tracy is asked to change something. And so we're very happy where this has landed, except for the dates, which we would like to push out a couple of dates and just test that with you. And one section in here on stormwater, which is a little unclear still. Brian, do you want to, shall I talk through that? Okay, I just find the right page, but the stormwater one, we've still been getting some feedback from DIA as to how they interpret stormwater. We resolved, I think it was January, to determine not to keep hold of our stormwater and to transfer that into the new water organisation, should that be our intended path. For consultation purposes, yeah, it's on page 24. We don't think that item on stormwater is necessary. Page 24. Here are some other matters. Yeah. Because it was a little bit hedging, foot in each camp. So we're saying that we will intend to transfer those stormwater assets out of council and the debt. And we've had confirmation in the last 48 hours from DIA that that's fully permitted and it won't impinge on our responsibilities. Is there any point of clarification on that?
Councillor Wards.
Peter, are you taking out the paragraph around stormwater or the structure around what the organised, just that? Okay.
Councillor Wallace.
The definition of similar size, those figures don't look very similar. They're 10,000 apart.
Sorry, what page are you on, Councillor
Same
Wallace?
page, 24.
24.
In that statement, these council have similar sized communities.
Yeah, 24 of the consultation document, 34 of the agenda.
Oh, that's the page that the stormwater needs to be removed.
If we deal with the stormwater, Councillor Wallace, then we can come back to your questions. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Your Worship. I was just going to ask the question, have all councils agreed to include stormwater?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks. Sorry, just a tiny bit of clarification. Most councils, apart from South Wairarapa, have not yet approved the consultation document. So has the stormwater question been formally before other councils?
Yeah, that's correct. Carterton were intending to. I never heard the final outcome of that, but that was their intention, and that they had indicated that that's where they would fall. So I know that's where they were all intending to be. And you're right. South Wairarapa adopted about 2 hours ago their consultation document. The others have their drafts coming together right now. I think next week is their likely presentation to for adoption. So we're not that far apart each other at the moment.
Are there any further questions for that? And I might just check that. I'm just going to have a quick flick through, or the Chief Executive could, of the South Y document just to clarify that stormwater in theirs. Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. Can I just check what we're allowed to ask questions about, the whole of the document, or?
I think we've covered off the stormwater, but absolutely.
Okay. Look, first and foremost, very readable. Congratulations for a consultation document to have words that I'm pretty sure will be well understood and related to. I think you've done a fantastic job in doing that. I have one technical question. Sorry, Carsten. If I go to the Mayor's message, which is on page 4 of the opening heading, looks like it's a quote, but I don't know who the quote is from. Or is it just because it's the life of all things is water, and without it nothing can thrive? The fact that it's in speech marks, is that a quote from someone, or is it a statement that later on I could see in Tracy's message was there? Sorry, I'm being pedantic.
I can answer that if you want. So it was a quote given to us by Robin Patangaroa from Ngāti Kahanunu that reflected back, and it was one of the notes that I've got because it is in speech marks. I understand Robin did give us some background information to that, but I haven't seen it. Oh. So that's something that we'll have a look at.
I'm just being pedantic.
Yeah. I agree. Look, it's in quote marks, and people look to see, because I think during the AOG I did question whether it was a whakataiki or a whakatauki. So we can follow that.
I mean, this is...
Councillor Wallace, did you want to ask?
No, I can hear you.
Oh, no, did you want to ask your question that you had on the other page?
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, about similar size, definition of similar size, 10 grand, 10,000 people is not very similar in my mind as a percentage.
Which page? Sorry.
84, I think it was. No, we're on 34, 24. 24, that statement. So if you got that, similar, that's 50% more, 100% more. It just doesn't, it's pretty wide ranging, in my opinion.
It's different than having 100,000.
I think, yes, through your worship, in context of for Wairarapa joining the Wellington region, for Taurua joining the Manawatu Wanganui region, in context of that, we are similar when we've got, even in terms of that picture of the East Coast, and the Taurua is actually physically perhaps the biggest of all, but at our numbers, which is sort of in the 5,400 to 5,800 connections average for each of the services, to just over 10,000, towards 11,000 for Masterton. They are a bigger party to it, absolutely. And yet in there is also Carterton and South Wairarapa, and South Wairarapa is much smaller again than us, so even more than half our size, or about half our size. So it's consistent in terms of if we were going to be part of a much larger group, like the Manawatu Wanganui, or what the government originally considered, which was only 4 water services entities for the entire country. So it's similar in that we've got small towns that each have their own services contextually in that respect. Even Masterton has 2 beach communities that they have to provide services to. So there is a lot of similarities than just the actual population.
Councillor Chase.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Tracy. Can I just get some clarity around, on page 26, in the pros, council will have less debt because our assets will be sold to the CCO and council will repay existing water service debt. What existing water service debt will we still have if we sell our assets to the CCO?
So the process, through your worship, the process is that a company is formed, you then sell your assets to it, but they will take your liabilities at the same time. So you get paid the net amount. With that, you reverse, you don't have your assets anymore, and you repay your debt from that money that's paid across. And so council ends up with no debt itself, and the debt ends up in the new water organisation, along with the assets that we had.
Okay.
And it's like a transfer, but it's more than a transfer.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks for that explanation, Peter. So in practice, we would be selling the assets basically for the price of the debt. That's how it would work in practice. So it's almost transferring the debt over.
Neutral.
But
It is.
from that perspective of saying that it's selling, it's really, we will sell you that and you pay us the amount of the debt. But in effect, it's really transferring the assets and the debt over to the new entity.
What we end up with is an investment in the company. So the net amount between the asset less the debt ends up as shares at council.
Yeah, makes sense.
Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Is there an independent valuer of the assets of each council?
So this is where LGFA comes in. They and Department of Internal Affairs initially made sure that the numbers councils had on their books represented a fair assessment of the amount owed on those assets. So that exercise was done in 2022-23 and agreed to by the DIA in conjunction with the finance managers of each council. Since then, of course, we've built more assets, we've got more debt, so those numbers have to be brought right up to date. Problem there is today we went and spent some money on some assets and we probably have incurred debt, so there's this cut-off difficulty that we will have. So there will be some retrospective calculation that's required at a point of line in the sand. But essentially, 2 years ago, we had 42 million in agreed debt of council relating to our assets. And so we were able to do some math back then about what that would look like. We are reasonably indebted compared to some of the other Wairarapa councils. That was a concern to LGFA and to DIA, just in terms of acceptance and how that would look. We have not yet had that conversation because we all are moving, it's still a moving target. That would occur when we determine whether to do a joint water services delivery plan. And I think that would be one of the outcomes of this consultation. The alternative is that we do a standalone water service delivery plan. So that looks more difficult to achieve because of that sustainability and our debt levels being high.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So our shareholding in the CCO will be our assets less debt at each council's, and we could end up with 20% shareholding or 10%, depending on the relativity of debt to assets. Right.
I think a lot of that is already worked through.
Need to push the button.
I think a lot of that is still to be worked through at the moment. Initially, it had been agreed that as shareholders there were sort of equal shares, but obviously then it's complicated through the transfer of the assets as well. So to get a definitive answer, I think that will come through when we decide on the next part of the process around the service delivery plans, noting that, you know, based on your finances, you might only be a 10% shareholder. What does that impact in terms of representation? Which I think everyone has agreed that would be equal representation, so they may not go hand in hand, but I think we've still got a bit more work to do around that.
Thanks, Brian.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Just touching on a point that Peter made about there's still some conversations with LGFA, with Internal Affairs. Is there any risk, and if so, is there a large risk that even if, assuming this is adopted for consultation, we go through a consultation, this is what the community wants and what we decide to do, that either LGFA or Internal Affairs will reject the proposal in any way? Do we have any risk of that?
So not with the joint water services option. There's risk associated with the standalone. That's in their reports that we made, that are on our website, publicly available for the standalone and the joint. Yeah.
Thanks. Are there any further questions, or would you like to make a comment, Councillor Sutherland?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, the other thing, just on languaging, Councillor Steve made the comment. We did pick through the languaging a little bit, and Councillor Scott made comment and tried to simplify it and keep it user-friendly. So there could be a little bit of confusing about community of interest, but it wasn't just numbers either. It was the whole thing, and it possibly included the spread of iwi through the whole area too. You know, dealing with two. There's a number of things to make it simple, but just to make a comment to Peter, the thing about the borrowing too and the assets is that our debt levels are certainly higher than some, but one or two of the councils here have got incredibly large issues looming ahead of them that's been identified in their long-term plans, which you'd have to say seemed a bit light, didn't they, Peter? You know, some assumptions were made, but one council in particular, you know, is in real difficulty, and you might say that that sits on the side of it. You know, the work to be done under a long-term plan situation by going it alone is probably insurmountable totally by one or two of a couple of councils, perhaps including us maybe too. So.
Councillor Wallace.
Yes, through you, Chair Tracy, Your Worship. So how is that long term? One of these districts have a glitch or a massive. How are you going to approach that?
Of course, it's not us, but
This company is.
we're aware that the pricing for the capital program for South Wairarapa is very high in terms of its estimates. So it may be too conservative, in other words, overstating the actual cost. There's some evidence that South Wairarapa has already had where projects, a project is substantially cheaper than the estimate that they had. So there's likely a repricing that's required for South Wairarapa of its asset management plan. Bear in mind they outsourced to Wellington Water their waters function, so their in-house capacity was transferred out, and now they're trying to make the best of the information that's been supplied out of the former Wellington Water work that was done. So I think repricing, I feel also Tararua numbers, we were asked to supply an extra 12 years worth of data that came from our asset management work beyond our 10-year plan. Okay, so this is from the WSP master plan work in the what I submitted to government, which was we were able to get that down below half what the WSP master plan was indicating. So in other words, we repriced our 10-year plan to what we think it really would cost, whereby WSP master plan had far more contingencies built in. So in other words, we're trying to look at 20 years of information in these graphs that are presented in here. The last 12 years are quite highly priced, even in respect of the Tararua numbers.
Yes, supplementary. So I'm just trying to get this picture. From looking back, you can see what's happened, right? And that would give you an indication if you were 50% out or 100% out. And then going forward, you're saying that you've done a 20-year look at it. And you've already mentioned some people have put in fees that are quite high. So for comfort, we're still kind of, we have got no concrete. I'm just trying to think of the people that are going to be paying these bills.
So within 2 years of this, the current bill that's before Parliament, the local government bracket water services bill, which is due to be considered by select committee now and looking to be passed by June, roughly, is the indication. That will try to deal with some of these matters where within 2 years of that bill being passed, a new strategy needs to be developed. So that new strategy will have to look at the big picture of water services right down potentially to the timing of projects and pricing of projects. So essentially it's going to reconstitute the asset management plans of any joint work that's going to be considered. That might be unclear, sorry. I'll try again. So if we all join together,
yes,
there's going to have to be a review of all of the asset management plans and strategies within the first 2 years of, post-bill being adopted by Parliament.
The comment that I'd make...
Then the numbers come right.
Sorry, Peter. The comment that I'd make is that Tararua District, Masterton District and Carterton all had audited long-term plans. South Wairarapa is currently, they went through an enhanced annual plan and they're currently with their consulting on their long-term plan now. The auditors have gone through that with a fine-tooth comb. It's been a very difficult process for them doing this at the same time. So you have got a level of assurance there with that long-term plan and that audit process. Brian.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to say pretty much the same thing, that largely based on the LTP, but even as of today, there is still quite a lot of assumptions made around those figures, and there's going to be more changes coming over the next couple of years as well. When you look at design standards, all the consent requirements, once again, those figures will need to be re-looked at either by the wastewater standards. All of those are going to have to be looked at again. Hopefully, that should make a lot of these projects cheaper, and also the numbers are as per each council. So there has been some efficiencies provided in terms of what it might look like with the CCO, but then there'll be other operational efficiencies built in. And my view is that the CCO will, they're going to be predominantly, this is the only thing they're going to be focusing on. They're going to have a good look at this once these CCOs are established, and then also to add to all of this, you will have the economic regulator to keep an eye on all the pricing and the charges that are that the CCOs will be putting out to consumers. So there's still a long way to go before we potentially see the the efficiencies, but there's a lot more work to understand how much. But as of today, we can only provide, what we know as of this point in time.
Thanks, Brian. I'll just ask Raj to expand a little bit too for you, Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Through Mayor Tracy. It's a really good question, and this, if I point you to page 32 of the agenda, and starts off with the title, "What does this mean for our pocket?" That clearly, those 2 pages clearly try, and Peter can expand on it, but what those 2 pages are doing is trying to articulate to the reader the difference between the standalone option and the options that we're proposing is option 1, which is the YT, Wairarapa Tararua model. So that clearly shows the efficiency or the cost savings that the option 1, which is us going together with the joint model with Wairarapa, savings for the ratepayers over the 10-20 year period. So those 2 pages shows the cost impact on the ratepayer, which I believe answers the question, Councillor Wallace, that you're asking about what it means to the pockets of our ratepayer.
Thanks, Raj. Councillor Wards.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Before we adopt anything, you mentioned there was some changes to the timeline. We haven't adjusted the dates of the evening sessions or drop-in sessions, though, have we? Thank you.
Brian.
Through your worship, you asked me to have a look at South Wairarapa. So their CD's pretty much the same as ours in terms of being silent on the stormwater as in that paragraph, but they obviously mention stormwater exactly the same as we have throughout the document.
Thanks for doing that. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. I think having a read through the consultation document and actually all of the other information, significant information that we've had throughout this process, it does make really sobering reading. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. It's also important to say, though, that it's not a choice. This isn't something that we've just decided to do. We're very clearly following the government's local water done well direction. So there are going to be a lot of extra costs, and I think that you started off your conversation with that. And I like the document because it is upfront about that. It's not trying to sweep that under the rug at all. What I did want to do, though, before we moved into adoption, though, is pass on my sincere thank you to Mayor Tracy, to Councillor Wallace, who were Councillor Sutherland, who were our representatives on the joint committee. I know that there was a huge, significant amount of time that was spent by both of you on that, so I'm really grateful. But also through to our staff. So Peter, I know how much, huge amounts of work you've done on it. Brian, you've done a significant amount as well, so thank you. And Karsten, clearly seeing a document of this quality, it's no surprise how much you're involved in it. So not some great options for people's back pockets, but hopefully we can get some certainty in our water. And I just wanted to say that I will support this consultation document, and I'm really grateful for all the work everyone's done on it. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just want to get back to my earlier query about ownership and so on. If in, say, 10 years' time, dividends will be, every company needs to make a profit, there'll be dividends to be dished out based on ownership share, I take it. If, for example, right now, because of our high debt loading or debt ratio to assets compared with one or two of the other councils, could mean that a smaller council ends up with a higher percentage of ownership of the enterprise and in due course, bigger dividend payout. But that same council may have delayed development work, knowing these potential, whether it was Three Waters review or Waters done well, and find themselves in a better position in terms of ownership of the enterprise. But pretty much immediately will have a lot of money spent in that district relative to their size or to their contribution, and will end up with a higher percentage of the shares in the CCO, and therefore long term do better out of it. Is that being taken into account in the divvy up of shares, or is it something that can't really be done?
So, through your worship, the company structure is unlike normal companies. It might still be a company, but it's not a taxable entity. It's governed by the Commerce Commission regulation and fee approval process. It's more akin to Scampower and how it operates. So in respect of how Scampower deals with maybe a good year versus a bad year, in a good year it will give the consumer a credit back through the consumer trust process. That's how Scampower has managed its affairs. The taxation, tax-free entity status is likely to be more around the following year. Pricing won't be as high. So I don't see that there'll be a dividend process. I haven't seen anywhere where such a thing is mentioned. Yeah, and it isn't a CC trading organisation, it's just a standard council-controlled organisation. So it's a special purpose entity than what we would normally expect. Yeah, so it makes it super simple in terms of no taxation, which is great. Means that a whole bunch of other consultants aren't required, but I'm not expecting there to be a return on investment back to the local authorities from this.
Thanks, Peter. That sort of sorts it out.
That's an excellent question, yes.
Thanks, Councillor Johns. And I think we've just got to remember back to, this has been going a very, very long time, right back to Affordable Waters, Three Waters, where, Peter submitted an awful lot of work through to the Department of Internal Affairs. That's been audited through them. One of the things I think is part of this process that is really transparent is that all of that information has been shared onto the website so people can go through if they need that level of detail. But it's been a long, long piece of work, so I'm not so worried about that, and the auditors have been involved at every step of the way as well as Internal Affairs, so yeah. Just to reiterate, sorry, Councillor Sutherland, you've got a question, comment? Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Long, then Councillor Sutherland.
Through you, Chair. Peter, all our water assets are on council-controlled land, is that correct?
Most of them.
So
some are on reserve land. That's one of the more complex issues. Not most are on our land, yes.
supplementary to that, so would there be an opportunity for a community to step away out of this?
So one of the areas that could happen is particularly the Pongaroa Rural Water Scheme. The issue there is that they still have to comply with the drinking water standards and have the qualified staff to do that, either contracted in or it continues by someone because they're servicing the Pongaroa township. So it's a mixed use supply. In saying that, Ekatuna Woodville and Dannevirke all have rural connections. So there is a mixture, it's just not the majority.
And I think when we referenced, the councils have got similarities, there are small variances, with water races and different styles. So all of that does get worked through, and we have talked about all of that. Yeah. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Who stole my thunder? Somebody. Peter. Oh, I was going to mention Scampower. It's not unlike Scampower Line Company, which is a limited company, and the shares are owned by a community trust. That isn't dissimilar to what we're looking at here, really. You could take some very close comparisons to the whole way they operate. But be that as it may. So the other thing I was going to mention earlier was on page 24, was just about iwi involvement. They had a chart of how we think the CCO might operate. So the comment I was just going to make, that it's going to be left to the organisation. Some of this is prescribed to shareholder council and the water board, but the iwi involvement, I think it's fair to say, Mayor Tracy, that's going to be left to the CCO to set up some sort of method of them being involved in the structure. But my final bit, I was really, really impressed on the first meeting we had. And at the end of the meeting, Robin Patungaroa stood up, and he's an iwi representative, also Masterton Council, isn't he? Is he? Iwi representative Masterton? Yeah. And there are some very strong competing interests on Masterton Council about this. But I was so impressed about him. He owns property in Auckland, and gave us an indication of what he pays for water there. And he said it makes his eyes water a bit for what but he went on to say, he said we can sweat the small stuff, the costs are obviously a concern to the community, but he said we've got to look where we are now, right now, and the cost of the life force, we've got to look ahead to the rest of the century, and he said it resonated with me, we're at a place now, we've got to make a decision for our future, and it's just the little stuff is the costs and how we do it. But I was really impressed with that, and I think not only is it we worry about the costs, but we've just got to do something, don't we, for our communities that goes out, to the rest of the century, really, 50 to 70 years. And to me, I think the process of as East Coast Council, such as we've got working together, it feels okay to me on the East Coast, really, for a long future.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland. And I think when you do have a look at that map and you see the 4 councils there, it's a big chunk. Not so much on connections and population, but that's a big area of land. Throughout the process, the 4 councils have worked incredibly well together. The calibre of the staff at all of the councils has been really high. I've been really impressed. But the hours and hours of work, and thank you, Councillor Gilmore, for acknowledging that, that the teams have put in. There has been a fair few late nights. I know Peter has lived and breathed this. Carsten's been working with those teams because every single week things were moving and changing to get us to this point, and it was very time driven. So certainly acknowledge, and Hamish as well, for your involvement in it, and Brian for the Chief Executives. I think they've had morning meetings as well as late afternoon meetings to get this through. So there's been an awful lot of work done, but actually the calibre over the whole and the conversations have been fantastic. The 4 councils have really worked very, very well together. So certainly left me feeling very, very positive about where we're going. So it's great. So thank you very, very much for everything to get us to this point. And I'm looking forward to consulting and talking about this to our communities, and we'll be arranging as many meetings as possible. Right, so South Wairarapa did adopt this morning. They have made one change, councillors, to the frequently asked questions, and as soon as my iPad opens, I'll read you. So they've asked in addition that a frequently added question be made available to make it clear that consumers will receive an invoice from both the council and from the new entity if selected in the future, and by transferring of debt and assets to the new entity, the obligations around payment are not eliminated. So they're going to share that languaging to add into those frequently asked questions. And as the advisory oversight group were going through this and we were discussing points, we would specifically highlight that into the frequently asked questions just to help people get out there and talk about that and try to identify those questions as we moved along. So they've done that one. The other one of note, and I talked about the transparency, so the advisory oversight group minutes will be released at the same time when all full councils have adopted that consultation document, so everybody will be able to see that too. Yeah. Right, Peter.
Thank you. I just mentioned this, which is the Oversight's report that was adopted yesterday, which is the final recommended wording. Because our document has been wordsmithed for the community, these are more formal. So double checking with these that we've got all of those elements covered would be probably the final check that I would now do. I've checked a couple and there might be 3 extra words. You know, we're not talking about a big change, but having this as a reference linked to this on that frequently asked questions, perhaps, Mayor Tracy, we can talk about that afterwards.
Yeah.
What Brian is suggesting is that we make a modification to one of the recommendations so that the AOG members' views are put in. Mm-hmm. You want to?
The wording shouldn't be too different because the AOG's
and the date.
Direction was for that, for languaging that everybody could understand. So, okay.
And the other is that to align better with the other councils in terms of the consultation start date and end date, we've tried to bring it all together so that we're out there in the community at the same time and the messaging is coming out about the same time. There's already been one press article done this week that's come through. We're sure that a lot more will come through, but to keep us all in the same fold, we would like to just modify the start date and end date of the consultation, which pushes out probably the hearings and final decision date. We've looked at those. I'm going to make some suggestions here. We've looked at the suggested dates that I'm going to make to align with our annual plan process so that they don't get in the way of each other. So you've got that printout there, or would you like? So this is on page 32, and perhaps if I just go through what we would suggest. So 32, not of your agenda, but of the...
42 on the agenda.
42 of your agenda, yes. So, the drop. Okay. Yes, it's very cute. So starting at the top, Friday 28th is fine. Wednesday the 5th is fine. Monday the 10th, public consultation opens. That would be the 14th of March. That's on the left, top left. Okay, so that's Friday next week. Then on the right, dropping down, Wednesday the 9th of April would change to Tuesday the 22nd of April, which is the Tuesday following Easter. That just gives everyone essentially an extra week and Easter to consider this. And that, yes, Brian's just saying that's where all other councils will land as well for that date. So we'll all be the same. Then Wednesday the 16th, well that's now has to be moved out, and the question is, and this probably needs to go through Ali Dunn when she's back next week, Wednesday the 30th of April, which is the normal council. So a lot of that will depend, I think, on the number of people that want to be heard and whether we can pull that timeline off. So that's subject to confirmation. And then Wednesday the 7th would become Wednesday the 14th of May, where the decision making occurs as to which option. And the option is likely to be one of the two options, and for the instruction to staff to progress the development of a water service delivery plan, be it single or joint. That's what's likely to occur then.
Peter,
Otherwise, all the other dates are fine.
sorry,
Yes.
with the hearing of submissions, obviously this document's got to be printed. Is there any way that the chief executive can approve that? Because if we've got to wait for Ali Dunn from annual leave, that might not fit the timings. So
It probably comes back to the actual recommendations now and the delegation that you're comfortable to grant the chief executive. So the first thing that would have to change on this is that the 1.2 would change from the 14th of March to the 9th of April, would become the 14th of March to the 22nd of April. And that brings us into alignment. And 1.3, it's suggested that Council delegate the authority to the Chief Executive and AOG members, which are yourself, Tracy and Kerry. And so that we maintain an oversight of those final changes. That would be, if you are able to see if anyone would approve that.
So I've just clarified that, but the recommendation is that 1.1, that the report from the Chief Advisor dated the 28th of February 2025 concerning the adoption of the consultation document for local water done well be received. 1.2, that the Tauranga District Council adopt the consultation document for local water done well for the consultation being from the 14th of March 2025 to the 22nd of April 2025, that the Tauranga District Council delegate authority to the Chief Executive and or AOG members to make any minor amendments to the consultation document required following final review. Can I have a mover? Okay, I'll take the moved by Councillor Wallace, it's seconded by Councillor Wards. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much to both the councillors and all the staff that have been involved in this, and we look forward to getting out into the community. This is a big challenge and a great conversation to have going forward. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Right, councillors. Okay. Would you like an adjournment for 5 minutes? We'll just adjourn for 5 minutes if we can, just to reconvene the room and team. Thank you. Right, welcome back, everyone. Moving on to the management report. Welcome, Sarah.
Afternoon, Your Worship and Councillors. We will go through this report how we would go through every other management report. I know it's your favourite report you guys receive every quarter. I think I just said that. I'll take the report as read. I'll start off with the external funding section. I do have to make a note. I have made a mistake on table 3.5 under the food secure communities. Under the funds received bucket, it shows 38,628. This should have been 50,000. So my apologies for the error. But otherwise, is there any questions? I know everyone loves a bit of external funding.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks, Sarah. It certainly is one of my favourite reports. I've got a couple of questions in this section. The first is, and you've clarified that with the food secure communities, but there are a few in there where we have a certain amount of funding aside, we've received less than we've spent, so building iwi capacity being one, where it's substantially more, and I know we've flagged this at previous meetings. There's also, we've spent more on Danny Burke fluoridisation and the IAF Pahiatua Kāinga Ora project substantially more. So just wondering if you could talk us through any shortfalls. But my other question with it is, I know sometimes it is about when funding's received. Totally understand that. But if we're paying that out early, is there a debt and an interest implication?
Great question, Councillor Gilmore. First question off the bat, I think it was around the Better Off funding section. So right after we submitted, well, put this report together, because bear in mind this is at 31 December, we have received funding from Better Off to align us back to where our spend is. Working with Mike and his team to fasten up this process to make sure we're getting our claims back as quick as we can, speeding up the turnaround. We do not charge or have an interest debt component to this. Our total funding available is our total funding available to us. I think you had another question was around the IAE funding. So council within their annual plans, and I'm pretty sure it was an annual plan, always was going to have a contribution towards this project. It was part of our growth budgets that we had for our reticulation network. Don't quote me on what that figure is. We are still envisioning, there is a contract in place for us to receive an additional minimum amount of $100,000 from one of our iwi partners that signed the contract, the Kāinga Ora contract with us. That has not yet been received. After talking with Peter around this yesterday, thank you, Mayor Tracy, for the question. After talking to Peter around this yesterday, it's when they have themselves received external funding or are in the process of attempting to receive external funding, and when they begin the development of that section, kind of like a development contribution per se, we will then be able to invoice and receive that shortfall that we're visioning in that space. I think you had another one.
Thanks, Sarah. Look, I think it was sort of all related, so I think you've sort of touched on that. But help me understand if we have paid out substantially more than we have received for a particular project, and there's a couple in there. You said there was no debt or interest component, but that is money we don't have for that purpose. So where are we funding the shortfall from? Are we funding that through debt? Are we funding that through reserves? Is there an implication if we're using reserves that we're not earning interest on that money? I'm just trying to work out if we haven't received money but we're giving away more money, what are the implications to us for that?
My apologies, I didn't understand the question correctly. It's a cash flow, it's a timing thing, and once we were able to articulate that and communicate that with the wider team, we're now seeing that increase in the frequency for making these claims. With regards to projects, there is always a time lag, unfortunately. Some of our contracts are written, funding agreements are written that we are to incur the cost before we can invoice. So I think a classic example of that would be the Route 52 upgrade, where we did get an upfront portion, but that got chewed up pretty quickly with the volume of work that was happening out in that space. And I think you'll see in this table, we've incurred more costs than what we've actually received, and that's just the timing of when we can make our payment, or our payment requests is what we call them at our end. We have to meet milestones in order to be able to submit those. So with regards to the debt or interest component, it will be included within our cash flow that we have available within the time, and how we fund that within our treasury activity. So some of it will be loan funded, like the IAF, because it was a growth project that went into the plan. Mm-hmm. It was planned debt we were to incur.
And thanks for that, because it's something I have been wondering a bit, because when we have our spent amount and then we know our final costs for that project, I'm assuming that the financing costs that might come along with that aren't actually included into the final total. They will just show in our overall financing costs. And it is something that perhaps jumps out a little bit of an activity that we believed was externally funded might actually have some ratepayer funding through finance costs. And so I guess that's what I'm trying to dig into. And I know it might be a bit difficult to look at, but some of those sums are quite large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do include an overhead portion within the, so say we have $1 million. Within that $1 million, we earmark an overhead portion, which is to cover my time, to cover any of my team's time, to cover any overhead costs that would be associated with it. So it's all kind of gets wrapped up into that total. So in a way, yes, we do account for it, but do I specifically list interest? No.
Thanks, Sarah. I think if I think about the building EV capacity too, whilst that gap's quite large, it depends on when they put that invoice in, because I think I did query that at one point, and all of a sudden there was an invoice there which creates that gap too. Councillor Wards.
Thanks, Me Tracy. We're still on the 3.2 table, Sarah, which then moves into 3.3, really my question. So I'm looking at the, how far down is it? It's the recovery funding DPMC. So there's a total there that we've received 900,000, we've spent 382. So we've invoiced them for everything. Further on, you talk about Rural Support Trust, for instance. I guess I'm trying to get my head around, we've got $900,000 in the bank, we've only spent 382,000 of it. Is the difference between 900 and 382, because I've got the calculator going, is that all of that going to Rural Support Trust? No. And what's the time frame within which we have to demonstrate that the $900,000 has been? He's looking down.
He
Just
did. He
watch
put
him.
his head strategically down, didn't he? Thank you for noticing that. I understand we've got until 30 June 25 to fully utilise these funds. We obviously still have resources employed in this space as well, that the remainder of the balance is to fund.
Because that was my next question, is it won't just be RST then, there'll still be some functions going on.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. Is there any further questions before Sarah moves on? Councillor Johns?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Yeah, just on that same 3.2 technology trailer, I see we've received $75,000 from DIA and have spent $179,000. Are we going to invoice the DIA for the difference? And or how come it came to be 179,000?
Thank you, Councillor Johns. It's a really great question. We're trying to, I think the next line where we've got technology trailer within the table, and it's got this little doofer that shows that we've got taking 103,000 is coming from MIMBY funding, which is part of the digital hub, has been transferred over to this project.
No, okay. No, thank you.
Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, could you just, through the chair, could you please clarify, is iwi funding an annual thing from DIA?
Through your worship, the iwi funding is part of the Better Off package that we received, so the total 3.8 million, 500,000, I just had to look at the table, I apologise for the delay, 500,000 was allocated by the council at that time when we got notification of the 3.8 was allocated for this. So no, it's not council, it's not ratepayer funded, it's external funding we're receiving for this period.
Just clarification, so I know it's I know it's not ratepayers' money, it's taxpayers' money. So, but is it, how much of the taxpayers' money is going to iwi funding there? 3.8 million? Just 500,000?
500,000.
Yeah. No, I just saw the figures on some other funding, so no, thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace, and that's been over 2 years. Yep. Okay, right. Into headroom, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're all pretty familiar with these tables now. It's been a little fun time taking you on this journey with me. Is there any? I think we did this actually in the last quarter. We included the percentages just so that they were, and I think that was feedback we received from our auditors as well when we were doing our long-term plan finance strategy. Is there any questions around this before we move on to?
And it's not reflected here, through you, Mayor Tracy, with the headroom. I know that we've bandied around when we get to a certain level that we were going to do something strategic and change our. Yes. Yeah, okay. It's going to get answered there, I think.
Thank you. Through your worship, I'm going to take items number 5 and 6 together because they are very related. I'll start with number 6. So Peter, just when we were talking around our local water done well consultation document, he spoke around the debt levels specific to Three Waters. We haven't publicly put this in a document, so this was our opportunity to put it out there for our community to see and to know what we're up against, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with this. So at 30 June 24, Council had 41.742 million of its 69 million in external borrowings as debt that was associated directly to our Three Waters activities. This is 60% of our total debt. The conversation that was just had made me go looking further for some more information to provide you. So Our total asset database for Three Waters as at 30 June, because you know me, I love a good figure, was $179.242 million. So the debt figure makes up 23% of our total assets, Three Waters related. Because I love a good fun fact. So within our credit rating process, I know we've talked around our year 4 being our year where we're going to get extremely close to our debt limits. And our long-term plan is based off Three Waters remaining within council, obviously. So the credit rating process was something we were going to look to do in years 2 and 3, which is coming up pretty quickly given we're in March now. This is an item that's on our agenda with our Treasury consultants that we meet with every month. We talk around this in quite a bit of depth. So I guess our next steps, now that we kind of have a consultation piece going out around Three Waters and we have a little bit more knowledge around what could potentially come, our next steps in this process is for us to do a cost versus benefit analysis work around what does our revenue look like with Three Waters removed, what does our debt levels look like with Three Waters removed, and is the credit rating process still something that we need to go down? Any questions around?
Good piece of work, Sarah. Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy, and thanks for spelling that out. I found that stat really interesting as well and really helpful. I've talked a bit about the credit rating process as it first come up, and want to make sure we obviously make the right decision and don't get ourselves locked into something that may cost us quite a lot going forward. So I know we are coming up to that sort of time frame, and officers will be working with Treasury and with advisors. My question though is, will that come back to council, this committee, before a final decision's made? Just wanted to, that we will see that analysis.
Through your worship, when talking through this with our Treasury advisors, by no means do not let me fool you that I'm a subject matter expert in this. I take their advice. What they've suggested is that they actually hold workshops and walk all of us through this process so that we're all sort of taken on the journey should we get to this point. The fact that it's a standing item in our management report means I'm going to continually update you as to how we're tracking and where we're going, and whatever information I can provide, we will certainly look to do as we move forward.
Thanks, Sarah. I love a good fact as well, and I think there was some real value in that one. And I'll talk to the Chief Executive whether we include that in the FAQs for water, because I think that will be something that will be of interest to residents. Councillor Sutherland, did you have a question?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. I just forgot to bring the rates forms with me, but you and I were talking about the cost of water and our rates. I was just looking at a couple of, and I just forgot to bring them, but just on an average urban property at the moment, the rates I looked at, the Three Waters were about 2,100 to just over 2,000 on both of those. Is there another figure in the UAGC or hidden away somewhere else? I just didn't bring the form. I was just trying to get my head around the charged amount. Yeah, I just wanted to. So 2,100 was very obvious with stormwater in this, and then I thought, now there's a bit more to this, I think. Maybe?
Thank you for that great question, Councillor Sutherland. You're stealing my thunder. The next item is number 7, is around water charges. So this is just specific to water, and it was just putting in on paper and in easily understandable terms for anyone to sort of see. When Raj and I spoke with Mayor Tracy around the agenda yesterday, she asked the question around our total waters as opposed to just Three Waters, which is what I've done. So I've gone away and done some work, and for all of our Three Waters, for the urban ratepayer, it is $2,035.45, including GST, is just targeted Three Water rates. As you alluded to, we do have a portion of our wastewater which goes under our general rate. So 5% of our wastewater rating requirement as a general rate because it is deemed to have a public good, public benefit. And that is calculated on page 170. Look at me, I brought my long-term plan. Page 170. And I can't give you a dollar figure per urban ratepayer because the way it's calculated is the 5% of the total revenue required, which is $197,000 for wastewater, and it's apportioned at a on your land value basis for your rate, so our general rate. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Thanks, Sarah, that was fantastic.
Did you want me to talk around the waters? I think when we spoke yesterday, you were a little surprised around the extraordinary and what that sort of looks like as well. Does everyone understand how and what we do there? Is it quite clear? Cool.
I think in questioning it, when I was having a look at the agenda, it was around just obviously being with the advisory oversight group, it was understanding the differences between each of the districts and what that might mean. Yeah. So I look forward to, and I guess that'll be the interesting part, is around that general rate component and under any entity that will come back and be charged through council and go out that way. So just a slightly different model. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Tracy. In time, when we hopefully get the district on meters, and I'm an extraordinary user, so I'm on a meter, but I don't have any incentive to save 80 cubes. To me, that's illogical. So if you went out, and I don't know how you're going to meter it, because I'm going to get charged 80 cubes if I use it or not. And that's not going to conserve 1 ounce of water. And this is my argument. This is why I want to get meters in everywhere tomorrow. Because if we run out of water, we're in trouble. And I don't know how you could separate that out. Or has it ever come across your table?
Through your worship, more times than I care to have the conversation, especially my grandfather's probably the worst that I've had this conversation with, if I'm absolutely honest. The 80 cube per quarter is based on, I'm sure that there's a lot of mechanics or engineering behind it, but that is what it is assumed the average urban ratepayer would use in a quarter. So that's where the 80 cube minimum charge has come from. We were trying to have people conserve water as users going over and above. So that's where your fee for going over the 80 cube comes in, and the more we charge in that space, the less likely you are to want to go or to even go over. So I guess that's where our water conserving aspect of it comes in. Raj, do you? I know he loves the water topic.
Thank you, to your worship. Sarah is correct. Currently, that's how we try to, one better word, equalize, I guess, what we call the targeted rate that's being charged to the urban ratepayer. And then for extraordinary connections, we charge what we call the fixed charge, which is equivalent to a targeted rate. So that's how we arrive at the 80 cubic meters per quarter as a calculation that we've done to estimate what the consumption would be for urban area. However, Hamish can jump in, but I'm quite sure that once we roll out what we call universal metering, we will revisit how we are charging. So you're absolutely right. We may actually, as part of an option, do not have a minimum charge, like what we do currently. So that's will be part of the process when we roll out the universal metering. We'll revisit again what the charges, the pricing mechanism would be. So that will encourage, I think, the concern that you raised about how would people conserve. If you have a minimum of 80, I'll just consume it. So that will be looked at as part of the universal metering project.
Yes, supplementary. That's my whole argument, because the little lady that lives by herself and drinks 1 cup of tea or a litre of water a day, she's in that 50, 80 litre gap. Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I understand cubes. So I understand the science. I'm just trying to get this thing to happen tomorrow.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. And I think that, you know, any water entity can only charge those that are using it, wouldn't differentiate. Yeah. So that's where some of my thinking was going when I was reading this. So it will happen. Sorry, Councillor Johns, my apologies.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Sarah, is it merely coincidence or that the 41 million is about 60% of the 69 total debt, and that $2,035 in rates is about 60%, and that goes in waters, is about 60% of the average rate bill for it? Is that coincidence, or is it that's about where it should be?
It's a fun fact I didn't know, Peter Johns. Thank you for doing the maths. I don't have an answer. Raj, did you have something you want to?
Through your worship, it's a good fun fact. It's a matter of coincidence.
I thought it
The
might be.
targeted rate is set from the cost of the tree activity, and the debt funding is driven from capital costs relating to development and level of service projects. So it's coincidence.
Good work, Councillor Johns.
Okay, item number 8, curbside recycling. So I was asked to put, similar to the water exercise, I guess, what is the charge and who is being charged for this curbside collection? I think there's a lot of misinformation around in the community around what and who and where happens with our curbside recycling. So we're just saying that for the 4,310 urban ratepayers and the 422 industrial commercial rating units that have this service available to them, they are charged $107.86 within their annual rates bill. I did reach out to Jo to discuss what the uptake is for the service. She has shared with me that for curbside recycling, we're looking at a 70 to 75% uptake within the community, or for those rating units that have the service available to them. Where we are sort of lagging is within the glass collection, where there's only 20% uptake. And I did ask around contamination, because I do love a good fun fact. And she said our average contamination is sitting on or under 15%. So they do quite a significant amount of audits themselves. She said that the industry standard is 15%, and that from what she knows from peers, a lot of them are sitting around 30%. So we're doing extremely well in this space, and that comes down to the men and maybe ladies on the ground doing the bin inspections and the audits that go along with this service.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great to know. It is certainly a topic of conversation from time to time.
Thank you, Your Worship. And then the last item that is attached to this report is, I wasn't quite sure how these tables were going to pull through into the report, so I put them on an A3, but it's A4. Sorry. Just to give you a bit more information, see if you could see it a bit better.
No questions there? Okay. Thanks, Sarah. That was a really, really valuable report. Thank you very much for the work that you put into that. Can I have a mover, please, that the management reports received? Moved to Councillor Chase, seconded Councillor Gilmore. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, welcome, Beth. 6-month report.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and councillors. I will be presenting the 6-month performance report to the end of 31 December. And joining me at the table today to present their sections will be Sarah, who will be going over her service performance measures. And I also will have Mike, who will go over his CapEx report, and Raj will cover off the debtors report. The remaining sections will sit with me. With your permission, Your Worship, would we be able to have Mike present his CapEx report at the beginning, like we have in previous meetings? Oh, sorry. We are looking at page 69. Item number 8.
Welcome, Mike. We're all
Thank you,
yours.
Your Worship, councillors. Capital expenditure report from there. As you can see, we made a really good start. And it's carried on into the second quarter. So if we were to take out again, I've just highlighted at the start there, but about how the budget was constructed. So you've got the 53.4 million there as the current budget with a requested carry forward that we ended up with 2.7. We have the Cyclone Gabrielle response and recovery funding, as well as the Paetua pool part, which is also externally funded portion to ourselves, and also with the impound suppliers. But that all being said, if we were to go down, it looks like we're roughly, as of January, about just over halfway through the spend for our financial year. Going into the detail of it as well, you can see that we've just tracking through as the entire portfolio as to how we've gone through from planning into delivery. You'll note that over half of the portfolio is either in planning and delivery, and I hope that all of the updates that we do provide further clarity and support to this as we're going into this with how many projects and which ones we are currently tracking with the project sheets. I'm happy to take any questions on that as we up to 8.6 or.
Does anyone have any questions for Mike? Yep. I'll start with councillor awards, and then we've got some. I'm sure some others will be here too.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just mindful that I don't want it to be me. So thank you very much, Mike. Pleased to see that, we are making progress. I have a couple of questions, and I know it was probably a bit late when I read this, but if we look at the in-delivery ones, because they're the action projects, so that's item 8.3, are we renewing the Paetua Town Hall roof?
So that was part of one of the ones that went into the long-term plan through you, Your Worship.
Oh, okay.
We did, after doing a major assessment and in coordination with the rationalisation project, we have just then to make it as watertight as we can.
Okay.
We won't be spending the entire thing on the roof as much as we can.
Okay. And further down, I knew that we'd put the Akatea toilet block as in the long-term plan as a replacement upgrade, but I see you've got in brackets on hold pending a funding stream.
Yes, because as part of the long-term plan as well was also identified for TIF funding for a 50%, so half of it was meant to be either TIF funding and ours was meant to be the other
That's
portion
the tourist.
of it. So, yeah, infrastructure fund. So
Yeah.
they, from what I understand, haven't opened their doors for that kind of funding. So at the moment, we haven't progressed with it.
What's the signals looking like?
I haven't had any positive indication about it. So
Is there, without that 50% TIF funding, is there any other plans? Because that was one that I did talk to the community about, and yeah, there is some growing concern that will hit priority at some point. So the TIF funding hasn't been released at the moment, and we don't think it'll be released in the next 12 months. Or have we looked to get any signal from anyone around that?
I have not. I can chase up with some of the team though as to
Yeah.
where we're at with it. On that premise as well. I'm sure that we can look into the options. I mean, we did have some of them priced up anyway, as we'd just done the one out at Waihi Falls. So
Yeah, if we can make some inquiries through on that tourism infrastructure fund and just see if there may be anything so that we know what we might have to be looking at, because that, yeah, I did talk to the community about that. Mike, the Northwood water treatment upgrade, that's been there for a wee while and it's not quite still over the line. And I see we still get a few, performance measures and CRMs around that. How's that progressing?
good, Your Worship. We did manage to conduct. I'll put it into the management report as well. Just a few other photos, but we did manage to before December last year. We did manage to tidy up a lot of the pipe work out the back of the plant. So there were some leaks out there for that. So they've been addressed. We're just currently working through the tank replacements and the action points that came out of it, sending letters to the community as well about the installation of their own tanks and the like. No, we are working through it, and the only other part there as well is just the roof that also needs to be addressed out at the treatment plant site as well. But yeah, those upgrades are underway.
And that flushing plan for the pipes is...
Oh, correction, I was talking Akatea. Correction, Northwood upgrade. Yes, correction. My fault. Apologies, Councillor Smith. Northwood. Yes, we are working through it. The flushing program is going. We are just looking at sending out our communications plan for the Northwood community. We've been approached by Te Mata Ora as well as Te Whatu Ora as well as Te Mata Arawai for both of these. There's just their considerations into the health plan as well in regards to manganese. So they will be heading out to the community. I think that we're working through that with the communications team anyway. So we've just organised that. I think in the last management report I put in the notice unit for the flushing, but at the moment our treatment plant is really, we've fine-tuned it. So it's producing some good clear water out the other end of our plant, so it's looking really good. It is just a case of the reticulation network at this stage, being that we didn't have the flushing points in line.
Yep, no, that's fine. Are you able just to let Councillor Wallace and myself know just around the communications plan? We've been working with the community a bit out there just so that we know if we get any questions, that'd be great.
Yep, absolutely.
Happy with that, Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, because I thought we were further on from this. But you've done some flushing out there because they found... Who's come through? Oh, there you go. Thank you. Wherever you are and whoever you are. Okay, can I ask another question then? Sorry?
Yeah,
well, can you answer that one first? You've obviously done all this work and you just found out.
So for doing the flushing, like one of the parts here is we actually need to install the flushing points. There's only been a couple of historic ones that, and the part of it as well as that historic flushing, I think, as alluded to in the last management report, wouldn't clean out the lines as effectively as what we're suggesting at the moment, which is using velocity to clean those out. So,
sorry, where I was sitting is we went out to a meeting out there last year, and the guy's name eludes me. He lives in Levin or down south. Eugene. He was very informative on what they're doing, and they're doing that on Wednesday. That was last year. So I'm just a little bit fogged up.
He's been involved in this project since the start. He's still heading this project. He's our senior project manager here. The main effort though has been and was phase one was to upgrade the plant so that we produce good clean water. So.
And the other question, just while I'm on it might come through in an email, that the SCADA upgrades, we must be nearly at home based on them, because that costs us money if you haven't got that right now, we're going to be in deep doo-doo if we run out of water in Eketahuna.
No, fully appreciate that. Phase one was completed. Phase two is where we're at with contract negotiations, but to be fair, we've gone out to market for those. We'll be up to a second sort of kickstart meeting with all of our suppliers. But yeah, we're just negotiating the overall price. So part of it comes down to we'd have the capital costs. Depending on how we organise that will be the operational. But yeah, we're right into it at the moment. Yeah, and then we'll be rolling out the upgrades. The whole thing was stock taken, get a full appreciation of all the different communication lines. And yeah, I'll provide a full update on it. You know.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Sarah. Okay. Mike, the only other one here for me, you've got 8.4 Carnegie, the Carnegie building. What plan? I guess it's a high profile, high interest one for the community. So just bear in mind, keeping people informed. We don't need to go through it, but just as long as we are keeping the community informed and involved in that.
Absolutely.
Councillor Wallace?
Yeah, I might have missed something, but the Paitua camping ground
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
is that going to happen before the 17As have actually taken place, or are we chasing our tail? Like, I just trying to figure it out.
We part of that was that we've already got consent requirements. That is all part of it. The upgrades, they upgraded the septic system, and this was the second flow-on effect of that consent requirement.
The team at Carnival Park have done quite a bit of work down there. When I visited last and went walking, I was quite surprised to see all the work and the barbecue and everything. Yeah, it's looking good. Sorry, Mike, I was just checking through mine to make sure I had no further questions. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you. Awesome. Back to you, Beth. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So I will carry on and cover off the items number 5 and 6 in the performance report, which item 5 is a high-level overview of how our operating performance is, together with going over the detailed explanations that accompany the significant variances. I would just like, before I begin my report, though, I'd like to draw your attention to page 64 and report item number 13, which is under the transportation activity. There is a slight typo, which is my mistake that I've only just picked up, and where it reads that it was an unfavourable variance of 5.257 million, it should read as a favourable variance. So that's on page 64, under the transportation activity. So if I go back to the start, item 5, where we talk about the high-level analysis, I am going to take the report as read, but I'm happy to take questions as we go along. I'll cover off the main points. So if we look at the graph on page 57, this illustrates where we hit at 31 December in terms of our operational performance. So we can see that our year-to-date actuals resulted in a favourable variance to budget. So by 6.36, I'm just going to round it up to $6 million. So we landed at 22.79 million against a year-to-date budget of 16.7 million. If we look at the graph, we can see most of that is driven by the external subsidies that we have received to date. So we had budgeted to receive 18 million at 31 December, and our actuals to date were 25 million. I've detailed what makes those up within item number 6, which gives our explanation. However, I have highlighted for today's discussion our three main external funding sources. So at the top, we've got Cyclone Gabrielle reinstatement works of 5.5 million. Most of this was carryover funding from the 2024 financial year. As Sarah mentioned in her management report, the timeline given to the team to spend this is 30 June 2025. Next, we have the Route 52 funding of 1.318 million, which was unbudgeted, and I believe historically we haven't budgeted for Route 52. So it's always come through on our operational reports as unbudgeted funding. And then third highest is our NZTA operational works of offsetting that is our NZTA operational works that have come under budget by 194k. Any questions before I move on to the operational costs associated with the operating revenue? We happy? Okay, so operating costs, we can see that we were overspent by $1.3 million at the end of December. And that kind of aligns with our external funding. So where we've received more external funding, we've got the associated spend against that, which if we look at our operating expenses on page 57 within that graph, we can see that we were roughly 800k overspent in operating expenses. So when we drill down to determine what the underlying drivers are, our main one is the contracting expenses, which goes hand in hand with our external funding. And then next after that, we've got the community grants that are paid out. The way that our budget phasing is, we phase these throughout the year, but the timing of when they're paid out can be first half of the year, as we've seen today. And our third highest cost is our maintenance expenses. You'll also see that our finance costs are 500k overspent as well. And we'll cover this off more in the Treasury section of the report, but it's to do with our pre-funding, which Sarah and I will go over as we proceed. Any other questions around
Councillor Wards?
Just while you're on that table, thank you, Beth, through you, Mayor Tracy. I know you've talked about finance costs being covered off. The fees and charges, that's because we haven't done as much as we thought we were going to be doing in terms of consents, in terms of dogs, all of those sort of stuff. We budgeted more than we're actually doing. Is that effectively why that's?
Through you, Your Worship. So that is a combination, sorry, Councillor Wards. So that is a combination of the timing of when our invoicing is done and what has been budgeted to be received within that year. In terms of the dog registration revenue, I believe that we're not going to recover all of those, all of the revenue that we had budgeted to receive. But yeah, I'm not too sure whether you want to add more to this, Sarah.
Yeah, I would just add in with the example around the building consent revenue. Obviously, there is the way our consenting process works is we outsource the processing of the consenting, so there is a decrease in the corresponding expenditure as well. So our fees and charges may not come back to where we budgeted for, but we would expect there to be an associated decrease in revenue as well. I mean expenditure as well. My apologies. Right terminology.
Are there any other questions for item 5 for the high level area?
Councillor Gilmore?
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. So are you just looking at that figure 1, or are you looking at figure 2 as well? My question's related to figure 2.
Through you, Your Worship. Councillor Gilmore. Oh, sorry. Figure 2 I will talk to as it's related to the detailed explanations. So if no one else has any other questions in respect to figure 1, we can move on to item 6, which is where we cover off the detailed explanation for the significant variances.
Figure 2 is still in that item. Are you? Yeah. So page 58, figure 2 that Councillor Gilmore was referring to. Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Gilmore. Yes, so we'll cover off questions for figure 2. Sorry.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks, Beth. I just had a question on pensioner housing, which is in the connected communities section. And look, I know what we had budgeted for in the long-term plan. Should we be concerned about pensioner housing from a self-funded perspective? Because at the moment, it still is costing more than the revenue that we're generating, which we've had some discussions around turning that around, but I just wanted to see your level of comfort as to how we're tracking with pensioner housing.
Through you, Your Worship, thank you, Councillor Gilmore, for that great question. With regards to the pensioner housing activity, we need to bear in mind that our full year's insurance is within these year-to-date figures. Our full year rates are also within these figures. So we do expect this activity to come back into a surplus per what we've budgeted for the financial year. This is on our list of deep dives. So I think I chatted when we were talking around an annual plan and looking to bring back fees and charges discussion around pensioner housing. So some of that deep dive might be covered within that piece of work that we bring back to you on the 26th of March. But Your Worship has also asked that we do quite a deep dive within a management report, so that is on our horizon as well.
Thanks, Councillor Gilmore. I was concerned that that reserve's already overdrawn, how we're addressing that as well as we're not keeping on top. So that's why I've identified that one as, a topic that we'll be looking more into.
Are there any other questions? I'm just going to combine the couple of items so that I don't miss anybody along the way. I'm a bit out of practice with this, sorry. Any other questions? I'm happy to take any questions that you have in regards to item 5 or moving forward in item 6.
Beth, I just had a 5.5, the operating expenses, 800,000 more than, budgeted. What are your top 3?
Your Worship, our top 3 operating expenses are contracting costs, community grants and maintenance expenses.
No further questions on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that would be our quickest detailed analysis conversation today. I take that as we've given enough information in the report. Next section is service performance results.
I just double check with councillors. So in item 6, detailed explanation, if people just want to go through page by page just to make sure that no one does have any further questions. I think I made note, Councillor Wards has already raised around dog. No, I've made that note too. I guess just having a look, there was quite a bit in the waste management. Yeah, I just want to take a slow check. I did ask the question around Dennyvert Multisport and the insurance. We covered that. And again, looked a little bit at the number of consents. I think we have covered that off in your question, Councillor Wards. Awesome. No, I'm comfortable. We can move forward.
Thank you, Your Worship. We attached to the report, I think it starts on page 85 of your agenda, is our 6-month service performance report. This goes hand in hand with our Wave 2 as well that we've received, which is also attached to the dashboard, similar to we did in the first quarter report, just providing them for information purposes. I've given our same sort of detail that we provide around how we're tracking and trying to give quite a bit of comparison as to where we were, a bit of a trend analysis as we sort of go. Of the mandatory measures, I think in the first quarter report, I signalled number 7.2.1, 7.2.2. The only change that we see within this as we hit the 6-month mark is there's a new addition, which is the final measure results. The number of complaints over 1,000 connections. This is currently, we've received 26 CRMs. So although it's tracking as needs improvement at the 6-month mark, I just wanted to put into comparison the total number of CRMs that we're looking at that has put us into that bucket. Is there any questions? Sorry, Your Worship, if you don't mind, I'll just talk a little bit more. I completely forgot. When going through the report, I found an area that really piqued my interest. That's an area that piques me and Tracy's interest as well. It was around our public conveniences. In the 6-month result, we have received 107 CRMs relating to our public conveniences, which is extremely high and will mean that this measure won't be met come year end. I had the facilities team do a bit of deep dive for me around the number of complaints. As at, I think it's Thursday last week, we've received a total of 138 complaints with regards to our public conveniences. 46 of them relate to blockages. So when talking with the facilities team, it's not our pipes, it's not a plumbing issue, it's a vandalism issue. So in conjunction with Your Worship, we thought we would bring back a big piece around public conveniences and as a deep dive, and I propose that we look to include this analysis around the CRMs and just get these numbers out there so that the public know what the cost of these complaints are doing to our district. I think it was one of your fun facts around the cost of public conveniences we have on our district. It's quite a lot when you put it out there, and then when you get 138 complaints, 46 of which relate to blocked toilets, 49 of them are Dennyvert, they're either Broad Street or the Excludes just down here. So it's quite a big chunky piece of analysis that I kind of geeked out on a little. But yeah, looking to bring that back as a big deep dive.
I think for me, when we're looking at the annual plan, there's $493,000 tied up in public conveniences, and you read through some of the service performance and you see those complaints around more cleaning, and every public toilet has a sign on it stating, what the last clean and bits. So whenever I'm sort of going to those public toilets, I'll have a look what time it was cleaned, and some of them don't match, but we have an awful lot of public toilets. And then when you go into, I think we heard this morning in the strategy meeting around some of the policy with our freedom camping, one of the things that people often want is toilets, and it's something that I'm really conscious of. As soon as you have a facility that becomes an area that becomes popular, people want more toilets. And I'm not sure that we can, residents completely understand just how many of those public conveniences that we do have across the district as well. So, Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. And I'm not necessarily expecting either of you to answer this because it's quite operational and it's specific to the facility side. But it is something that pops up, public conveniences, a lot for me. I know I have a particular resident who every few weeks will send me a message about his disappointment of the state of the bathrooms, which is always interesting to receive. But I know that we do have obviously a contract with the cleaning companies, and I know they do mark down when the facilities have been cleaned. How confident are we with our auditing of how well our contractors are meeting their contractual obligations? Because I think there's almost two parts of it. We know that we are paying for a service, and I'm not suggesting that the service isn't being done, but do we know it is? Are we confident that the contractual work that those cleaning crews are doing are being audited, so then we can verify that, go back to people and say, we know it's been done to the standard that they are paying for. And I think maybe for me, that's probably the missing link, because I know we're paying substantial amounts of money for it, but yeah, that might help.
I'll just get the Chief Executive, I think, wants to make a comment on that. The only one that, I would make a comment on is that I have come across a couple of the facilities. So I'm really surprised, our cleaners work incredibly hard. Some of them are out at 5:30 a.m. in the morning, and I have had a look at those toilets after they've cleaned them. I certainly have no issue, but I'm not sure how you have a look at that as an audit as a whole. So Brian, you might want to make a comment on that. And I think there's also, talking to people about, what expectations are.
Through your worship, I think the challenge is obviously resourcing to audit these on a regular sort of day-to-day basis is challenging. We do get around when we can. If we're in Woodville, then we might check on it. One of the issues with public conveniences is that you can clean it and 10 minutes later it's filthy. You only need one or two people to go in there and not care about it, and you've got the third person coming in complaining, so they're very hard to keep on top of, unless you sort of got something like Taupō's toilet facility where they have cleaners in there all the time. So even if we increase the level of service cleaners, I still think we would get complaints for them.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Tracy. Completely appreciate that, and I don't want our staff to have to be following cleaners around to make sure that they're done. But I do wonder, and not something to answer now, but if maybe some thought can be given to how we might be able to verify, because that helps us when we're talking to people to say, look, we know that it's being done, and this is why we have confidence. And I don't know if that, and it might already be happening, a photograph once things are being cleaned, that is fairly common practice with some contractors. It just means that we can stand over it when we have those questions and look at the level of service, but may already be happening. But
yeah, through your shot, yeah, good point. We'll just look back to see Carter. We can sort of look at some toilets, they sign the board, and everyone that goes in there can see that the board's been signed at the last time it was clean. So yeah, I'll talk to Carter and we can look at something. Yeah.
Thanks. I just thought it would be an interesting deep dive, and I know that I've had, sorry, Councillor Wallace, I've had, complaints where people have been outraged, and I've just happened to be, there at the time and received that complaint and gone down and been able to, that's quite easily dealt with. But we do, our ratepayers fund public conveniences for a lot of our visitors, so it's just around making sure that we're providing a good service, but actually understanding what that looks like. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I can categorically state that our cleaners do a fantastic job. Our problem in this country is people. Now, I think people in this room probably use a convenience and leave it the way they find it. And that's the problem. We're not addressing the elephants. And there are people out there that do not give one iota. And that's what we need to address. We can't put cameras inside the toilets, as I've mentioned before. We can put them outside, but then we create another problem. We've got to sit in real time and catch them, and so forth and so forth. And the law, as we all know, can't abide to what we want to catch because it's the law. But please, I think, from my experience, they are doing a fantastic job. And going back to what our CE said, it's the next person that comes in. And I'm sorry to say that our state of affairs in this country, the benchmark has dropped. Things that we never expected would happen are happening all the time now. I mean, who in their right mind, from what I've seen, absolutely loves building up toilets? I mean, really? So, yes, and I agree with what you say about the number of conveniences we have. In Europe, you have a simple way of doing things. You pay money, and each time it's used, it's completely washed, but there's a capital cost to that. Secondly, we've got two facilities in Dannevirke, one down here and one in Broad Street. Both well, Upper Domain, sorry, but I'm talking main state highway, high volume. You know, high, and I suppose we've got Lower Domain too, Upper Domain, sorry. And then we could go to Coronation Park, or is that locked? So anyhow, so Upper Domain is a very bad one because we know who hangs around there, but nobody can go and lock them up because we don't catch them. Anyhow, so going back to what I was saying, we could reduce it by 50%. And be targeted saying, oh, there's only one toilet in Dannevirke. But I suppose that would halve our costs, wouldn't it? And then it might, you know, people might respect. Because everyone asked when they first did those toilets just here, why do the doors face the road? Well, because in the past they used to face the back and everyone used to, it wasn't a good place to be. So that's the first thing. We could cut the cost by half by cutting the assets by half. But the problem is, and this is a New Zealand fault, we're just letting too much of these people get away with this. And I feel sorry for the ratepayers of Dannevirke because they're paying for it. Oh, sorry, district ratepayers, yeah, everywhere. So if I don't know how it happens, I don't know what the uptake's down in Eketahuna, but people appreciate it, good people appreciate it, and I think there's more good people than bad people, but it's only that 5%. But if we can stop, this is Dannevirke for example, we'll lock one toilet up.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. Public convenience is always create great debate. I think that we will, you know, when we look at that deep dive, actually we will be able to see what is the toilet with the most complaints, what they look like, and start having a little bit of a look at that. And I guess, you know, we had a Keep New Zealand Beautiful campaign at one point, and maybe it is the time that we had, you know, some of these conversations, because it does cost us all. But actually, you know, when I think about COVID, you know, when everything was locked up, actually, how many of our truck drivers and people passing through needed to use those. So we do provide a great service. It's just an interesting one that we get so many complaints around that and just understanding that. But the vandalism certainly is something that I've seen and noticed also in Palmerston North City. They're struggling with as well. So thank you. So we look forward to that one, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there any questions around the service performance report dashboards?
The dashboard, I'm picking your site, you're talking about page 76, Sarah. Do you want questions through that report?
Sorry, Your Worship, the dashboard I'm referring to is in the attachment. So the service performance report starts on page 85 and the dashboards finish on page 148 of your agenda, I believe. Just to make you skip forward and back. That one. I might be lying on that 148. Oh, no.
Right, there was a couple, I'll just flick through mine. Was there anything that stood out? I've noticed that we had, there was a few areas that, there was quite a few that I was interested in, but do others want to ask a couple of questions? Some of the water clarity, and that's why I asked Mike around Norsewood, just trying to understand if those water clarity complaints were coming through that Norsewood plant.
Your Worship, I also spoke with the facilities manager with regards to the quarterly survey we proposed to undertake for the cemeteries activity with our funeral directors. She has worked with our comms team and they're going to send out a survey in the next couple of weeks moving forward.
One that sort of tweaked my attention was a little bit around the animal control and the number of comments and complaints that were coming in around animal control and dogs there, but also going back to the fact that we haven't had the infringements that we thought we'd do. What is the service level for animal control officers, doing, if they're in Eketahuna, doing a sweep of the streets and looking for roaming dogs? There's quite a few that are talking about rushing dogs and roaming dogs. Do they do that as part of the role when they've got the available time in a town? And I'm just thinking about, infringements and things like that.
Through Your Worship, yes, they do that as part of their job in terms of roaming and mainly looking for roaming dogs. And I think satisfaction, I had a quick chat with my manager regarding satisfaction this year, and I think we had some high profile dog attacks as well. And we had a fair bit of, I guess, of a roaming or rushing dog incident. So that could have contributed to the level of dissatisfaction in the animal control area. And sometimes, and I think partly could be timing into the number of incidents. Yeah. But definitely, as I checked with the manager, the tree animal control officer do spend a lot of time patrolling our district and being on the street.
Thanks. And I guess some of the similar questions just around roading and footpaths are, and I noticed footpaths have just dropped below where we want them, and obviously the reduction in Waka Kotahi funding is going to further impact that. So whether we can, collect and utilise some of those stats around building a case to the land transport plan, talking about the need for that, because it's a common complaint from all the mayors around the districts, but those footpaths and going backwards does concern me. But do we take an active, overhanging vegetation, we sort of wait for a CRM to come in, but if there's multiple complaints coming through about that as being a challenge for people with mobility scooters and walking, do we do we don't do any other sort of monitoring other than on an individual CRM basis requesting service? It's probably a question for Brian or Hamish.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the question, Mayor Tracy. We still have inspectors out on the road and they're looking at footpath faults, overhanging vegetation, weeds, all that sort of thing, which they lodge. And then the patrolmen, which are the guys just on there, one or two guys in a truck sort of roaming around, they'll do little jobs like that as they go around. So that is still happening.
I just wonder if there's, and I know when we do the network drive over, so if I'm thinking about roads, the network drive over, you know, is there a way that we can communicate through to residents that we've done that drive over, and start talking about how that's measured, because it's quite a technical process. Whereas there's a lot of comments just saying how bad the roads are, trying to dig down a little bit deeper into understanding that, and maybe, I guess understanding the renewal program and what the expectations are. It's just that, both those areas are sort of under that 50% satisfaction.
Yeah, there's a huge, I guess, data set that we could perhaps look at sharing in different ways, and certainly as those inspectors go round, we could be sharing out, look, we found another 10 new footpath faults, things are still getting worse, we still can't afford to fix them, sort of thing, perhaps.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. I think particularly the results relating to the survey were particularly interesting, remembering that this is the first time, I think, that we've received the report that it's been dynamic. So as in, if someone hasn't used a public convenience, then they won't be asked to rate the service. My question, though, and I'm not expecting an answer right now, is do we have any way of verifying that each survey response is from a unique individual? And the reason why I ask that is I did find it intriguing through some of the commentary, which I found really helpful, so thanks for sharing that. Some of the commentary that came through, there seemed to be some trends in the comments that surprised me how often a similar trend came through. I have had a bit of a look because I was involved in helping work on the survey of how it works in practice, and I do know that when our random sample of residents receive their invitation, they have a code that they're meant to punch into the survey site. I've just done a very quick test of that, making up random numbers, and it does allow you to continue. So I suppose my question is, because we will see what number people have put in, is can we find out if we check the numbers, the unique numbers that are issued through to our random sample, that the numbers entered into the system match that? Would be a helpful exercise, because that might help us determine how we view some of those results, if that's okay.
Thank you. Through your worship, excellent question. I would need to go back to our provider's key research and ask them that question. A little concerning that you can go in with any random number.
It may be duplicated.
Yeah.
They may have a process to identify that.
Yeah. Thank you for that feedback. I think your worship gave feedback that someone else who did complete the survey found it quite difficult and time consuming to do as well. I wasn't involved as part of this process, but definitely can chat to key research and come back with further information for you all.
I think it's good to gather, there's some valuable information that can be gathered. It's how we're using it and what changes we're making within the system if they need to, or, how it highlights some red flags that are out there within the community. Okay, Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do know that Key Research do complete Palmerston North Cities, and they have gone in and done a presentation for Palmerston North City around how to best utilise this information and survey data. I'm happy to reach out to see if that's something Key Research might like to do for us as well.
That would be fantastic. Lock and load that for the next meeting.
Right, I'll move on to the Treasury section of the report. I'll talk to the to figure 8 on page 76, which is our dashboard for our Treasury performance. As we can see, our planned borrowings compared to our year-to-date borrowings are ahead of where we'd budgeted to be. And that has resulted in our finance costs being slightly higher than what we had budgeted as well. So the reason for our planned borrowings being a bit higher than retrace my steps, where our actual borrowings, why our actual borrowings are higher than where we had planned to be is due to the pre-funding aspect of the Treasury function. So as Sarah has mentioned in her management report, we meet up with our external advisors monthly to go over strategies to minimise any interest rate risk to council. So as part of that, they go through our financial position, our cash position, and come up with a strategy on whether or not it would be a good time to pre-fund any debt maturities that are due to fall within the next 12 months. If I get you all to go back a couple of pages to page 58, where we had our performance dashboard. I'll try and make this better moving forward. I just want to show you the benefits of these meetings that we have with our advisors. So in the Treasury line, you'll see that we have a favourable variance of 180 for the 6 months ending 31 December. So that just shows that our finance costs are fully offset by our interest income received for the period. And that's just a combination of our interest rate swap strategies that we've implemented, where we're receiving the benefit currently because of the way the interest rates are working, and the returns that we're receiving on our invested funds.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Beth, I wonder, and this is probably going to be a very simple question for you to answer, and perhaps not a super sharp question for me, but it is something I've wondered as we've looked at these things before. I know that we spend quite a lot of time looking at hedging and swaps and the like, and I certainly can see where we have the advantage of that sometimes. Have we done some analysis on what our position would have looked like if we did none of those strategies over like a 24-month period, let's say, where we weren't having to move things around and lock it up? We were going off the best LGFA rate at the time. I think that would be really helpful for me, because there's obviously a Treasury cost, to say how much in real terms are we actually, how much is it benefiting us in real terms if we had have just gone off our floating rate for that period. I know that's a bit difficult because we've been in quite abnormal interest rate times with interest rates skyrocketing up and now interest rates coming down. But I think we certainly felt the benefit for a while as interest rates were coming down, and it'll take us longer to get the benefits in the changing environment. I'd be really interested to see that. Keen for your thoughts.
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Gilmore, for your very good question. Like we've mentioned before, we work in conjunction with PwC, who are external Treasury advisors, and during those monthly meetings, they have a tool where they put in figures and the team gets together and they're pretty much forecasting where we would be at based on the different interest rates, whether we hedge, whether we don't hedge. We also have compliance obligations that we need to meet throughout the year. So part of the strategy that they're forming for us, they're looking at which buckets. So when I talk about buckets, I'm talking about years we fall in and out of compliance. So it's basically a strategic tool, I guess, to make sure that we're compliant during those times. We've just been lucky with where we have hit with implementing our interest rate swaps because, as you've mentioned, the market for our interest rates has been quite favourable for some time. However, the flip side is that we're going to see the costs impacting council eventually as our swaps near the end of their tenure. I don't know whether Raj and Sarah want to add further on to that commentary for.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Sorry, I might just clarify my question because I think it might even be a bit simpler than that. It's more, I know all of the hard work that goes on, all of the time spent with the advisors. What I'm keen to know is actually how that has benefited us compared to the LGFA rate if we had have not done any swaps, or if we had have just gone, we're not going to do that, we're just going to ride the market. I would be, and I'm not saying that would have been better, but that would be really helpful for us to say all of this work has this quantifiable benefit. I do absolutely note, looking at figure 8 in the Treasury report on page 76, when you're looking at the interest cost performance, consistently we have been paying a higher interest rate than what we've budgeted. And I understand why, but I would be really keen what a do-nothing approach may have looked like from a cost perspective. I'd be interested.
Through your worship, we could come back to that. I think the team looks at that, what we call effective interest rate. So what they look at as part of the BI, the tool that they use is look at the effective interest rates that we have been able to achieve using our strategies and compare that against LGFA rates. And that's one of the targets that we have to make sure that we're achieving that rate. And the other thing, is quite important for us to also see that the broader picture here in terms of what we call funding. If we are exposed to market movements, then we are exposing ourselves to the whole LGFA floating rate movements or a fix. And if you recall how we set rates we set rates in estimating what the cost of finance cost is going to be. By having, I guess, a level of having a strategy that allows you to lock in, I guess, through the use of swaps, and we're able to actually not have what you call a significant variation between what your budget is that you rate for than to your actual cost that's going to be. We're also conscious as to our strategies comparing where the market is going. If we find that the market is quite buoyant, the interest rates are going quite high, our strategies are different. When we find the market is turning and going other way down, our strategies are different as well. So, and I think we can bring back as part of the next finance and performance meeting what we call the effectiveness of those strategies, which what we talked about quite often in a monthly catch-up. So we can bring that back as part of our metrics or analysis to show the work that we're doing and what's the gain or what's the benefit that we are reaping from actually the treasury management function. Yeah.
Thanks, Raj. I think that'd be great to bring back. Councillor Sutherland.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. I won't labour on this issue long, but I've brought it up a few times because this is an area that I get a bit dizzy with too, and I'm supporting Councillor Scott's comments a bit. But for the life of me over the last year or two, do I ever seem to be able to match PwC's advice and forward thinking with what actually happens? You know, and maybe it's too simplistic, but I just, and when looking now, we budgeted 4.7 and we have paid 5.7, so we're $500,000 down the Google. But then I'm reading through the PwC's Treasury report, which seems to get more complicated by the year, and thinking, that looks fantastic, we're going to make some bucks this next 6 months, and this turns out, I always struggle to match them, but I won't say any more. So any little bit of tweaking, I'll love to look.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say our dashboard excludes our interest revenue, and our interest revenue is where our swap revenue is coming into. So what you're seeing on the dashboard, or on the dashboard versus the PwC report, one includes the revenue and one doesn't.
Thanks, Sarah. I think that's a good one to bring back. We'll talk about that. Awesome. Right, we'll keep moving because we do have Rebecca Bell on the screen as well.
Thank you, True Worship. To the debtors report section, I got Rebecca online, and I'll come to her very, very shortly. Rebecca, thank you for being online, and she'll talk a little bit about the report that I've attached, which is on the DD. Just a quick overview, councillors, on debtors report. I tried to work with the team to look to change the report in a combination of something that you're familiar with and something that's new regards to addressing the recommendations in the report. We wanted to talk about facts and also talk a little bit of performance in the report. You'll see that in the DMC's dashboard that are attached to it. And what you also would see is the timing. You know, though this report, financial performance report, is of December 24, I've also included information as of February. This is to show that because the team was very much focused on trying to manage the DD issue and capacity challenges that we had, I wanted to show some February information to show a bit of progress that we're making in the DD space. So looking at para 10.1, I'm just going to highlight a few things, and then I'll refer to Rebecca to talk about her report. Para 10.1.3, I put a figure 10, a simple table to look at the number of DDs that we have, tracking the trend. It's quite pleasing to see that the number of DDs compared to last year has increased. So that's quite good to see, and we'll continue to do a bit of analysis and follow through on that. I've included in figure 12 the whole of council debtors and the graph, and that shows that as of December the debtors balance has increased from the opening balances, and I'll point to that when I bring up the DMC dashboard, and to show that the level of debt that we pass on to DMC and the performance that we had in that space, where we were able to collect more than $500,000 in the short time frame that we had with them. I've also included, I guess, in the report 3 sections. One is looking at overall council debt. One is a specific report and information on the direct debit issue, and then a dashboard report from DMC on debtors that we've transferred off to DMC. So if there's no questions to the council-wide information, I can get Rebecca to jump in and talk specifically about her report on a progress update on the DD issue.
Mm-hmm. Just take one quick question first, if I can, Raj.
Sure.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just to clarify, Raj, where you're open for questions, I certainly have a question on 10.2, which is the debtors managed by DMC. Are you looking for questions along those lines now? After. Oh, wait. Thank you.
Okay, on the direct debit issue, since I got Rebecca online, that would be looking at, thank you, Rebecca. That'll be looking at the updates on paragraph 10.3, that is looking at the update on the direct debit issue. I've included a table in that to show the figure 15. What I've done, councillors, I've placed a paper on your table which is updated table from the report. So what what the difference between the two tables is that the updated table in the report is the 602 number that we had of the direct debit issue, the impacted ratepayers, plus the 4 additional. So that's the correct number they're running with. In my report, what we have included in here is when as part of the project, we identified what we call the additional ratepayers. That was slightly a larger number, but when we went through that process, we identified that there ended up with being 4. So this report that I've included in the report actually pulled from the original spreadsheets, not the final number that we landed with. Yeah. So Rebecca, you want to walk through your report on the progress that I've attached as an attachment to my report.
Kia ora koutou. Lovely to join you this afternoon. I think overall I can take that little update as read. I've clicked off that screen and now I've got to find my screen again. It's gone. There it goes. But largely speaking, the work that's going on now in relation to the direct debit project can be kind of categorised 3 ways. One is the sort of the follow-up, tidy-up tail end of the work that we were doing at the end of last year, contacting people and working with them to achieve some kind of resolution to their the balance that they had, whether it was a credit or a debit balance. That's first. The second one is preparing for the recalculation process for next year, and making sure that we have identified all the bits that need to be improved, and that we are set up and ready to go for a smooth recalculation process. And then at the very end, I'd like to run a formal debrief with you as elected members to get your feedback and lessons learned from the process, so that we can make sure that we take note of any of those things to inform the project management practices of council. So as you can see from my simple update, we are almost there with the people who have a credit balance. There's just one person that we are still trying to connect with. In terms of those with the arrears balance, as Raj said, there were 4 additional people who were added to this list. So that took it from 212 to 216 impacted households. And if you can see on the graph there, under 1.2, the blue shades are the ones that are resolved. The green are what they are. Those are people who have told us that they intend to deal with their arrears over time on their own terms. And for some people that will be before the end of this financial year. Some of them are very, very close to paying it off, and for others they want to pay it off over a period of time, but not necessarily via direct debit. So that's the green wedge. And then the others, the orange and red, are the work in progress people. So we're still contacting them and reminding them about the postponement option. All of these people have been sent a drafted postponement agreement, so to make it really easy for them. And so we're in a phase of just contacting them and reminding them about that. And again, 3 people that we are struggling to connect with there. I think one of the bigger challenges that we are facing, which has been a challenge all the way through, has simply just been getting this work done in the midst of BAU. It's very difficult to dedicate resources to this mahi, and so while it may seem to be taking some time, it's we're having to fit it in around staff's BAU as well. I think that's it really. As I mentioned before, we've got a team doing some work on thinking through the process, the recalculation process in detail, how that's going to play out and what needs to be done to prepare for that. So yeah, I guess I can open up to questions, comments.
Councillor Gilmore.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but was just wondering if there has been any update or if we have received any legal challenges or hints of any legal challenges coming through. I know that we've had some commentary about the potential for that in reports. So yeah, just keen to see if there's any update on that area.
There have been no legal challenges, formal legal challenges made. We still have customers when we contact them saying they're seeking legal advice, but there has not been anything that has really come from that for the most part. We did get another Lagoima 2 or 3 weeks ago from Community Law. So there's still some interest there, but no real decisive sort of action. So we are conscious that there are people who are talking to their lawyers, but we don't know what that looks like.
And Rebecca, can you also confirm that there were a few ratepayers who did say that they were seeking legal advice, but now have come to an agreement with us, either through agreeing to a postponement or the payment plan?
Yes, there have been some of those, not large numbers, but the odd one. Yeah.
Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Worship. Hi, Rebecca. Just an unusual question from one of the impacted households who asked me that when she signed the documentation and sent it back, I think to you, Brian, I'm pretty sure, she said, do we get anything back that I can put with my will kit to say this is going on my house? And she was really worried because she said, if I die next week, yes, my daughter knows I'm doing it, but you know, if there's any challenge to that, I haven't got any anecdotal evidence to show that I have actually made this arrangement myself.
Yeah. So the process that we're taking is when we get the individual forms signed back from the customer, and then Brian signs them, and as we accumulate a few of those, we then send a copy of that of the individual agreement back to the customer, and we do that in batches. So they might not get it within the week or two that they had sent it to us, but they will get a copy. We're just preparing to send another batch out very shortly. So yes, everybody who signs an agreement will get a copy of their agreement for their own records.
Thank you for that clarification. That's really helpful.
Rebecca, the 3 people that have yet to be made contact, what's the plan there? Because you know this is dragging out. That does concern me. Is there any? You know, you've got obviously the addresses, the names. Have you thought about a personal contact for them?
I know for at least two of those 3, we actually have names and contact details. Either of the person themselves or of a family member. It's just proving to be difficult to actually make contact with them. So, yeah, at the moment, the best we can do is continue to try by phone if we have an email contact. And I think we have sent out a follow-up letter. And we will be coming back to council shortly with some thoughts about how we might wrap this phase of the project up in terms of achieving resolution with everybody.
Thanks. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, Your Worship. Rebecca, so that would mean that those 3 people would receive their rates demands and either automatically pay them under the current scheme and not know any different. Is that correct?
In theory, yeah.
Back to you, Raj.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for talking to the report. And there's no question on that. Then I go to the last part, which is the DMC. Para. Thanks, Rebecca. That's on, let me just find. Yes, 10.2. Sorry, I think I jumped to 10.3. So 10.2 is where rate debtors are managed by DMC. So if I can just briefly walk you through the debt, 79. If I could just walk you through, explain the dashboard and just a bit of context as to how to read the dashboard that we have pulled together with DMC. So the intention for us, councillors, is we have now engaged DMC not just to do a recovery, but to do a debt management. So we're transferring the debt across. Over time, I think we would like to also transfer all debt that is with council, meaning those that are on payment plans and are making those payments. We also want to transfer them over to DMC, so DMC have a holistic picture of a whole debt and able to help us manage and monitor that. So the way in which the dashboard is done is in three rows. The top two rows are looking at the debtors that they are managing based on account, number of debtors, and the second row is looking at the dollar values. So from left to right is the way in which we have grouped them up is one, the upmost left is looking at all the active debtors, all of them together as counts. The next row is looking at last year's files, that means historic files as they call it. The center row, which is called the arrears, that means those who have a brought forward balance. So we want to manage them differently because the approach to those who brought forward balance is different than people with current balances. So that's how we wanted to do that. And the reason why we wanted to do it is, one is to segregate the debtors into three categories broadly, and also because the approach to those categories might be different, meaning an escalation. Those at arrears, we can make a demand. Those that are current, we tend to send reminders and get them into payment plans, and so the approach is different. Then in the last bottom row, it's where I'm looking at trying to show what we call performance. I want to show how well we're doing in this space in terms of collection, which is on the collection trend, and on the other left-hand side is under arrangement. I wanted to see how long the debtors are remaining in our system. That means what are their age? Are they quickly coming in, we're resolving it, and then they are repaid and they exit the debtors management process, or are they staying in our system for a very long time? And if they are, what are we doing? So that's in a sense the overall dashboard that we pulled from DMC. This dashboard is currently just looking at rates, which is the significant portion of our debtors. I'm looking at also developing similar dashboard with DMC on what we call other debtors, which is a much smaller portion of debtors, but want to make sure that we have transparency in reporting back to council on both. So any questions? And I think Councillor Gilmore, you had.
I'll go Councillor Gilmore, then Councillor Long.
Thanks very much, Mayor Tracy. Thanks, Raj. Just wondering, in general, how this transfer over to DMC has worked in practice, and a couple of key things that I'm keen to hear about is how impacted ratepayers or debtors within council were communicated and how it was explained to them. Why their file was perhaps moved over, because for some people it's quite scary, particularly if they believe that they already have an arrangement, which is one that I've dealt with. Has an arrangement, has been fulfilling their agreed obligations, and then very, very scary for them to then get a debt collection notice. The reason why I ask is, it does concern me somewhat. I very much support the reason why we're doing it, but our reputation has taken a significant hit with the direct debit issue. So the way that we communicate with these people should always be important, but that's even more highlighted now. And then the next part of that question is, is it a significant extra cost for us to be outsourcing the debt management as to what we budgeted for in the long-term plan? So just having an understanding of that. So two parts to that question, please, Raj.
Thank you, Councillor Gilmore. When we looked at transferring the debtors over to DMC to help us do the debtors management process, the letter that we sent out, we were talking about whether the letter should continue to be on council letterhead rather than debt management letterhead. So it has been on council letterhead. Then from a ratepayer's perspective, it's neutral. They don't say who it's come from. We made the call quite early in the piece when I was talking to the team, in a sense that it adds on additional administration for DMC now to maintain two different set of databases. So when we sent out the letters, we had quite clearly in the letter right at the very start explained to say what we're doing here and why the ratepayer is receiving a letter with a DMC letterhead, because we have actually asked or engaged DMC to help us in a sense in terms of managing our debtors. That's why the transfer has taken place. We also ensured that the format of the letter that is sent is exactly the letter that we use in terms of our debtors. So the structure, the content of the letter is exactly how council has done it, but the only difference is that it had a DMC's letterhead rather than us, but we included a para explaining quite clearly as to why the transfer has taken place. And as a result, and you're right, a few ratepayers in the first batch that we sent out did call and say, why was my debt sent over? And we sent out close to about 700 letters that we sent out. And we had close to about, I can't remember the numbers, but a handful of debtors call and express that why a letter has been sent. So on the perspective that we looked at, say 700 letters were sent, and we had a small number of ratepayers calling us, and in a sense not happy. We felt that in a balance, it was quite a good outcome. We also looked at the response back from the ratepayers regards to our payments was quite positive. If you look at the table and the dashboard trend in a short frame of 3 to 4 weeks, we had got far better people actually paying. So and I think we do acknowledge that it's a change in how we're doing it, and we also gave what you call a script to customer services that when somebody calls to explain further, and whenever now we engage with the ratepayer, we do explain. And so it was that initial letter that went out, and I think people saw, I guess, quite clearly the DMC rather than reading the right at the very start, the rationale, the reason as to why we transferred the debt. And I think that was an initial shock to the ratepayers. Regards to the second question on the cost, we worked out the cost. Most of the costs that we have from DMC, it's recovered from the interest charges that we charge, because as part of the process, we recover debt collection costs from the debtors, and we recover it from the interest penalties that we charge onto as part of the debtors owing. We also have budgeted as part of LTP DMC cost recovery budgets. So in our LTP, in our annual plan, we did not increase the budgets for transferring debt across, because that will be recovered from those two elements, from our existing budgets that we have, and also recovered from our penalties revenue that we intend to receive.
Thanks. Councillor Gilmore to follow up. Sorry, Councillor Long.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Tracy. Just a quick follow-up. Thanks for explaining some of that, Raj. I think the way that you have worded it from the letter that I've seen is a lot more gentle, the way that you've explained it, rather than quite direct language in the letter, which I understand it does need to be direct so people understand. more what I'm looking for with this, Raj, is good to understand overall how this is working. But the one that I dealt with, which was very promptly resolved by Roger through the Chief Executive, was someone that had an arrangement with council. The letter made no reference to the arrangement. They were a retired couple on the pension, very scared because it just showed it's been handed over to a debt collection agency, you owe $5,000 or whatever it was. We're trying to sell their house, so we're really concerned that, oh no, what implications might that have? Understand that mistakes can happen. What I'd like to understand though is, was that an isolated case? Or if we've transferred over 700, were a number of people that are on pre-existing arrangements being caught up within that?
Through your worship, yes, I do know that case, and that we talked about that with Roger, and also at the last team meeting, Rebecca brought that up. That's an isolated case. We acknowledge that was one ratepayer, I would say, that we missed picking up, because we have checks in place where that ratepayer was part of the impacted ratepayers, and we have checks in place to make sure that when we're transferring, we check against. We picked up all the rest, and somehow this one ratepayer slipped, and we acknowledge that ratepayer did receive that letter, but it is an isolated case.
Councillor Long.
Through you, Mayor Tracy, I'm on the exact same, or very close to the same sort of thing, ratepayer that did not receive in the mail a bill, and then was, after 40 years paying rates, was very disappointed to get a letter from DMC, and ongoing, and had discussions with this council, and very disappointed. Yep, so he's not happy.
Thanks, Councillor Long. I can, I'll come and see you offline regarding that one as well. Okay. Yep, Councillor Franklin.
Thank you, Worship. Since Mike brought that one up, I have one as well. But what had happened was they've always paid by direct credit, not direct debit, direct credit, and it was an oversight, and they had 39 years of paying their rates on time, and couldn't understand why it didn't trigger something in the system to say, hang on a minute, this is not the normal case, but the technology doesn't do that. I explained that to her once she got off her high horse, shall I say. She was really calm about it. I got her to ring the rates department straight away, and they sent her they sorted it out straight away. There was never going to be a problem, and they removed any threat of penalty. So, yeah. So I suggest that she go direct debit.
Thanks, Councillor Franklin. Are there any further questions, Councillor Sutherland?
I was just going to stand on the other side of the fence here, Mayor Tracy, and we can pick up one or two people who've had a slap in the face. But we all know when our rates are due, and we've got a responsibility to put those dates in our diary or do things about it. So if someone forgets, well, that's bad luck and they get an apology, but they still should know. But we were in a lot of trouble here in this council, and our systems were all over the place. Our debt management, our organisation of this area has been wanting, and it's either staff or it's all sorts of things. And I think the best thing we could do is fire it to someone who does this for a living, which is DMC. There'll be some teething problems, and if we have to apologise and take some flowers, a bottle of wine, so be it. But to me, this is progress, and that's it. I don't mind a bit of criticism for not being too. But I've had some complaints, but I mean, I've just explained them what they are. We've got to be more proficient. We've got to be more efficient. We've got to be more professional. So I'm just putting a tick for that side.
Thanks, Councillor Sutherland, and I'm pretty sure I don't have a budget for the other items you mentioned. Kerry's covering it. That's fantastic. Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yesterday when we met, you asked us a question around transparency around rate penalty write-offs. something we're going to look to include in this, which is extremely valuable feedback, and I'm sure Raj dittos what I'm about to say. Any feedback you have on what we've changed in this report, please, we welcome the feedback. The figure that I have as at today is $7,339 and rates penalties have been written off. That is year to date.
Thanks, Sarah. I just thought that was the other part that was just missing from that report. I thought it was great. It's good to see that level of detail, but I just wanted that one more figure. So thank you very much for that. If there is anything, councillors, that you do think is missing, feel free to let us know. Councillor Wallace.
So what qualifies that write-off?
Raj, the question is what qualifies a write-off of rates penalty?
Council, through your worship, Council has got a rates remission on penalties write-off. There's a range of criteria that's there, and if they meet the criteria, we write off penalties. For example, if they come into a payment plan and they meet the payment plan payments, at the end of the payment plan, all the penalties that we've applied, we will write off. So that's one example. Or they've come to an agreement to say that, for example, they want to pay their rates, current rates owing for the full financial year because they have missed the first two payments. They come to an agreement to say, I'll pay the full financial year. Can we have an arrangement to write off or consider to write off the penalties? Then we do that. So in some cases, we do 100% write-off. In some cases, we do a less than 100% write-offs. So we follow the criteria that are set in our remissions policy when we are applying a penalty write-off.
Would you like to see that policy, Councillor Wallace?
I think going back, we need as clear as, I can't say clear as mud, because we're coming out of the murk, we're going into the clear. And I agree with what Kerry's saying. Most of us, and I feel sorry for those, but don't get me wrong, we have to take ownership of our own responsibilities too.
Thank you. Right, Raj, any further?
Yeah, a few final things. Good discussion, councillors, and I agree that the process that we go through in the decision that we made to transfer management to DMC, and I strongly believe is the right one, because I think they have the right expertise and they have the right systems and tools, and I think that will help us catch up on where we have fallen behind on this. The other thing that I just wanted to mention that I forgot to say is that we have also, through working with DMC the last 2 months, progressed, we have now progressed 6 properties to an abandoned land process, so we're accelerating that. We have also issued the first mortgagee letter informing sort of a demand to 31 properties. We also now have issued what we call a final demand for mortgagee for 5. So we are accelerating what we call the intervention or what we call the escalation of debtors management through this process. So I think in the next report, in terms of collection trends and actions, you'll see a much greater improvement towards in that space. And I think what Councillor Carey has talked about, and I think that is part of the benefit us moving to engaging further with DMC in this space. And we'll continue to make sure that we are ensuring that we are managing the transition and working closely with DMC to avoid incidences like this.
Right, thanks, Raj, for that comprehensive report. Are there any further questions? No? Okay. We've got a recommendation on page 55 that we receive the 6-month performance report for the period ending 31st of December 2024. Can I have somebody move that? Thank you, Councillor Long. Seconded, Councillor Sutherland. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Right, that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting, and apologies, councillors, for being slightly over. But thank you very much for firstly taking such a passion and an interest in this. This is, the team put a lot of work in. We are certainly working very hard in this space to increase the level of transparency and understanding within the finance and performance area, and I think that we went away to do that today, so thank you very much. I'll close us with our district whakatuaki. Let the winds of the Ruahine and Tararua give you strength. Let the waters of the Vanuatu nourish you, for we are the pounamu of Te Tāpiri Nui o Whātonga. Kia ora.